disciples are on the road again. They're headed for Jerusalem. But Jesus didn't want anyone to know that. He didn't want any more disturbances or interruptions because he was teaching the disciples, preparing them for what lay ahead. Now, for the second time in Mark, he tells them exactly what lies ahead. Let us hear these words from Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 37. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on that way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. On the way, they had argued with one another who was the greatest. So, how do you imagine that argument went? Today's gospel doesn't tell us what the disciples said, but it's not difficult to imagine. So seriously, let's take a moment to imagine. Maybe Simon or Andrew started it out by claiming that one of them is the greatest because they were the first disciples called. You know, seniority matters. Maybe Peter argued that it should be him because he's the only one who correctly answered Jesus when he replied, "You are the Messiah." Being right and having the answer should count for something, right? And then maybe the others countered, "No way it's you, Peter. Jesus rebuked you and called you Satan." That's not so great. Maybe Peter, John, and James said it was one of them because they got to go up on the Mount of Transfiguration and the others didn't. Besides that, those left behind ones couldn't even cast out a demon from a young boy. Shouldn't the greatest be successful? Maybe Peter touted himself as the greatest because he walked on water. Think about that, though. Can't you imagine the other ones rolling their eyes and saying, "Yeah, and you sunk like the rock that you are." After all, the greatest is only as good as his or her latest accomplishment. And I'll bet it was an 11-to-1 vote against Judas. They all knew he was a thief. Morals are important to greatness. At least, that's what we say they are. It's lucky for Peter and Judas that when the argument took place, they had not yet denied or betrayed. That's not what the greatest disciple would do. Maybe John argued that he was the greatest because he was the beloved disciple who laid his head on Jesus' breast. The greatest are always well placed and connected in high places. And what about those other disciples who are not quoted in the Gospels and have no gospel named after them? Couldn't be them. Surely the greatest disciple would at least be published. I can easily imagine each disciple making a case for his own greatness and a case against the greatness of the others. You know why that's so easy for me to imagine? Because it's often the conversation I have in my head with myself. Maybe you do too. It seems we are always establishing pecking orders of greatness. Look at the pecking orders in our world and country today. They're all around us. We live with and participate in them even if we did not create them. Citizens are greater than resident aliens, who are greater than illegal aliens. The educated are greater than the under or uneducated. The rich are greater than the poor. The employed are greater than the unemployed. English speakers are greater than non-English speakers. Men are greater than women. White or light-skinned people are greater than dark-skinned people. Christians are greater than Jews, who are greater than Muslims. And the list could go on and on. I wonder what pecking orders rule in our lives today. Who are the winners and losers in those pecking orders? In what ways are you and I striving for greatness? What arguments or conversations about who is the greatest are we having with ourselves or others? I obviously don't know what the disciples said or how their argument went about greatness really went, but I am convinced it did not bring out the best in them. Striving to be and arguing about who is the greatest rarely brings out the best in us. That may just be the greatest humanitarian crisis in our world today. We strive to be the greatest human being instead of bringing out the best in our humanity. But what if we have completely misunderstood what greatness is really about? What if Jesus is reversing everything we thought we knew or had been told about greatness? Whoever wants to be the first must be last of all and servant of all. That's how Jesus understood greatness. Last place? Really? Like I said, I'm not a runner, and I don't run for a reason because I would be in last place. I don't think I've ever argued about or tried to be in last place. Have you? Last place is the last place. That's the last place I want to be, and I suspect that's true for you too. What if greatness in Jesus' mind is not about how much we have or what we have accomplished, but what we have done for others? What if greatness is not about the position or place we occupy, but about the space and place we offer others? What if we stopped arguing about and striving to be the greatest, and we sought to discover or recover and bring out the best in ourselves and each other? What would that look like in your life and our world today? Here's another way of getting at that. Who is the best person you've ever met? I'm not asking about the greatest, but the best. Now, as you're trying to imagine that, why did you pick them? What qualities or characteristics make them the best? I'm guessing it wasn't their fierce competition or their indifference to the well-being of another. I doubt it was because of the position they hold or their reputation. And it probably wasn't because they praised you or told you what you wanted to hear. And chances are it wasn't because they were rich, powerful, or successful. And I'll bet you didn't review their resume before naming them as the best person you've ever met. I'm betting it was because of their authenticity, honesty, and integrity. What you saw is what you got. You could count on them. They had your back. They were there when you needed them. They saw you and respected you and listened to you. They took your life as seriously as, and sometimes more seriously than their own. They spoke the truth, even when it hurt, because they cared about you. They saw more in you than you often saw in yourself, and they believed in you and committed themselves to you. They offered wisdom and insight into your life that was more than just telling you what to do. They cared and made a difference. They enlarged your life and world. They inspired you. They were your strength, hope, and faith when you were weak, despairing, and unbelieving. They made space and place for you in their life. They made you feel that you were important and mattered to them. They loved and accepted you. They didn't judge, compare, or compete. They forgave you. They freed you from the pecking orders of your life and world. They brought out the best of you. The bottom line is that they put your life and well-being ahead of their own. They called you into your better self. They helped you recognize the way you want to be and live. And if you already knew that, they helped you remember what you had forgotten. So what about you and me? I wonder what others are saying about us. Are you and I the best person someone has ever met? Or are we just arguing about greatness? Jesus is always naming and calling forth the best in us. For God's sake. For the sake of the world, for the sake of ourselves, and for one another. Let's stop arguing about who is greatest. If you were to be the best person someone has ever met, what would you want them to say about you? What qualities or characteristics would you want them to describe? Pick a couple things or ways that you would want to be. How are you going to become that? What parts of your life need strengthening in order to become that? And what parts need changing in order to become that? What would it take today to offer another the very best of yourself? Amen.